Slightly different episode this week.
Yes, kind of non-newsy. I mean, kind of current events-ish, but...
It's more, well, yeah, so it's more of an overview of the market and trends as of late. We keep sort of dancing around this topic of auto manufacturers stopping their EV development, at least in the U.S. or for the U.S. market.
We're scaling it way back.
Yeah. And that has brought about a number of conversations of, I mean, obviously EVs are dead. So, so we kind of want to dive into that a little bit. Not EVs are dead, but that whole, for lack of a better word, retreat from EVs for the U.S. market. Why? And what are the effects of that?
Why, and whether or not that's a good idea.
Yeah. So I am Phil Royle. I will be one of the people along with you on this journey down this rabbit hole that we keep kind of inching, like we tease it a little bit, but then we never actually fully dive in and violently jam ourselves into the rabbit hole for 30 to 40 minutes, which is what we're going to do today. Back to me, because it's all about me. I direct people to youtube.com/@thewalkcar, where you can see our smiling faces and my less than bright face, I guess. I've been trying to work on my lighting.
You need to get a trendy ring light, Phil, like
I do, but
to be a real influencer.
The reason I haven't is because I'm cheap, as listeners to this podcast will well know. So I tried to do it with other lights, and it just isn't working. Maybe I'm going to end up with a ring light. I don't know. Whatever. Aren't I supposed to say what my credentials are? I'm not going to. Okay. I'm just going to pass it back to you.
Ed Sanchez, ring light aficionado, evidently. Podcaster for 4+ years. Involved in various ventures elsewise for the last quarter century. I went there. And I don't know. I don't know what's ahead. Uncertain times, for sure.
Wow. Went dark. Went as dark as my video feed. You've actually been doing podcasts. It's interesting. You've been doing podcasts longer than what you say, I think. Because this whole thing started with you were a guest on another podcast. You were like a repeat guest.
Yes.
As like an industry analyst expert. And you were a guest on there. And I think we kind of came away with that because we were already doing thewalkcar.com with more written content. And I think we came away from that with, well, why aren't you just doing this for us? Like, why are you can still go on and do these other like guest bits. That's fine. Like, I don't want to stop that, but you know, there's so much useless knowledge in the warehouse of your brain that
I have a lot of that.
And I like to banter. So sounds like a podcast. Welcome, or that's the introduction basically to our decades-long friendship.
Yes.
All right, what do we want to talk about this week? I already said what we want to talk about. We want to talk about EV industry implosion. It's not really.
Yes.
But is it?
Well, it depends on who you listen to. I'll tell you, and this kind of coincided with Trump's second term, but you know, what's the saying? Correlation is not always causation.
Yes.
So while I do think they are somewhat related, I don't think it's a 1-to-1. So kind of going back a few years, I think that the tipping point where there was kind of this mad rush into EVs was, I would say, probably around 2018, 2019, that roughly coincided with the introduction of the Model 3. There had been EVs before that. I mean, obviously the Model S, the Leaf, you know, if you want to expand it beyond just pure battery electrics, the first gen Chevy Volt, so forth. But up until that point, I think they were mostly considered novelties.
They were glorified golf carts, for lack of a better word. And some of them even were golf carts. Some people in my neighborhood have them. So
the Gems, that was I don't even know if that brand's still around, but they were basically like golf carts with horns, headlights, and anyway.
Yeah, rolling death traps that you can still buy like on Craigslist. It's just, I don't know.
So I think the Model S started to change the conversation a little bit, because I think that was the most serious effort up to that point to build a really compelling EV, full featured, not weird looking, good performance, kind of state of the art technology.
A range of more than 100 miles.
Yeah, that really kind of got people's attention. Like, wow, this could really be something. So I think that probably started a lot of conversations in a lot of boardrooms around the world. And I think a lot of companies got caught up in the Tesla hype. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a belief at that time that, and I think stretching out the timeline, you could still make this case that it's inevitable that the transportation sector is going to largely electrify. But I think what's happened is there's been a readjustment of expectations in terms of the timeline. That's kind of the big picture narrative, I think. And I think too, like any new technology, the first generation is going to be awkward. It's going to be compromised. It's going to be a little kludgy sometimes. And so a lot of companies tried doing things and made efforts, but they weren't particularly compelling in a lot of cases. And they were kind of expensive. They didn't really offer real compelling reason to buy them over an ICE equivalent. And people were like, well, not to sound like Trump, doesn't go very far, but short range, kind of expensive, just, they're like, nah, I'll pass. So, for a while it seemed like Tesla was going to be this kind of unstoppable juggernaut that was just going to completely dominate the industry. I think that narrative's kind of decreased a little bit. Now, I will put things in perspective though, because a lot of people say, oh, Tesla's toast, Elon just totally sabotaged everything, blah, blah, blah. Keep in mind, in the US, Tesla still, I think, has around 40% market share of the EV market still, which is significant. I mean, earlier on, I think it was like 60 or 70%. It was, they just had a huge, commanding share. But I mean, to be honest, it's, if you go back and listen to Musk, he kind of said as much. He said there will be more competitors. Our relative market share is going to shrink. So I don't know.
Yeah, that was inevitable. As the industry grew, the pie got bigger. Your slice, percentage-wise, may be smaller, but your numbers and profit could still be higher.
Yeah, and I mean, even though they have, over the past couple quarters, they have lost, in an absolute sense of lost sales, even if they would have continued growing, their share would have still shrunk. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off on that, but I think what happened, kind of fast forward to today, Trump came in, kind of took a wrecking ball to a lot of the, policies of the Biden administration, among which were like pro EV policies, the tax credit. They tried to stop a lot of the NEVI funding for charging infrastructure, which, as we covered, they kind of missed the boat on trying to stop that, and so they had to release the funds. So I guess at least that part of it is still back on with a few changes. But after that, and not just in the U.S., I mean a lot of, especially in Europe, there's been a real change of tune, because a few years ago it was like, oh yeah, we're going to be all EV by 2030. I think I remember, I mean, certainly Volvo, I think, was kind of at the vanguard of that, saying they were going to do that. But um, I I think,
It was pretty much across the board in Europe.
yeah,
It was like 2030
Audi,
or 2035.
Volkswagen,
Yeah.
yeah, and they said we're going to be fully EV by this date.
Yeah.
And
I
now
think
they're kind of like, well, maybe not.
a lot of that, to go back to what you're talking about with, they looked at Tesla. You had, when was the first year of the Model 3? Was that 2018? Something like that. It came in.
Basically, yeah.
It came in and it started overtaking, like, it was very quickly, they called it luxury, and I've always argued that, but it was very quickly the number one luxury brand in, like, California. That it was outselling BMW and Mercedes. And it's like, I don't know exactly if I believe that it's luxury, but okay, sure. You know, it's eaten from those.
Premium-ish, I
Yeah.
guess.
So it kind of ate into that market. And then the Model Y comes out and it starts like in 2020, 2021,
everyone's
something
lunch,
like that.
yeah.
It was eating like everything else. And the manufacturers saw this and went, oh my goodness, like this is the new market. And they, as I discussed, I think it was last week, they chased the shiny new thing. And they just jumped in wholeheartedly. And at the same time, you had this like multiple things all happening at once of the emission standards were increasing to the point where you needed to go hybrid. So you might as well, eventually the writing's on the wall, you're going to have to go EV just to even make the requirements for those emissions. And everybody kind of jumped in at the same time, governments and with manufacturers of, well, let's chase this, and Tesla is proof that they can do it. But I don't know if it was a solid business model to follow necessarily, whether it was scalable to, whether Tesla's model was scalable to the entire industry and still supporting everything in a very quick changeover that would be less than 10 years.
Yeah. Well, a couple things is Tesla has had a few near-death experiences.
They're constantly having near-death experiences. They
No, but
only
I mean-
know two speeds. One of them's death, and then the other one's billions of dollars in profit.
Yeah. So, the very famously and publicized production hell, which was kind of the lead up to the Model 3. And, even Musk said there was a time where I wasn't sure if we were going to make it. They made it over that hump.
But that's
took a
part of
lot
it.
of- yeah.
That's part of what wasn't even scalable and that nobody was really looking at. Elon was sleeping on the assembly line. He had tents outside in the parking lot trying to assemble vehicles. Like, this is not what Volkswagen or BMW or Honda should be doing. And this was the model they were following.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my commentary on that is, Tesla was basically founded in Silicon Valley. It's now headquartered in Texas, but they still have a pretty substantial presence in California. But Silicon Valley in general kind of has this fail fast mindset, is just try different stuff, move fast, break things, figure out what works, just kind of build the plane, mid-flight. And that's kind of how Tesla approached a lot of things. Didn't always get it right. They've had some, pretty widely publicized snafus, but anyway, that is very different than the legacy automakers, and especially the more kind of conservative ones like, Toyota, for instance, who's very, very methodical, careful, iterate, test, retest, just take a very cautious approach to everything. And that approach slows down the development timeline. And also, too, there's also something called the sunk cost fallacy. So where it's kind of, in your own mind, you're like, oh, we've already invested so much money in this, we need to stick with this rather than try something new. So I think those factors are still in play now, because even though EV profitability has improved some, they're still more expensive to produce and generally have smaller margins than ICE vehicles. And so that's especially in these companies kind of in transition where they kind of have a foot in both worlds. They're trying to kind of balance that. basically taking the profits from ICE and funneling some of that toward EV development. But the narrative I'm hearing now is the positioning of ICE as like luxury, or like the premium model. And I guess I find that kind of funny, because in some cases they're objectively going to be not as good as the EV models. But I think with some customers, they don't care. They like, they're still after that kind of that visceral kind of experience, the sounds and even the smells. I mean, some people, like the smell of burning gasoline and whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You seem to have an inordinate number of wealthy friends for some reason. So,
it's the neighborhood I live in. It's the neighborhood I live in. I'm just accidentally here. They somehow let me in.
But I mean, people that have bought, relatively exclusive or expensive cars that could afford an EV and have chosen not to for one reason or another. If they've said anything, or you've kind of observed anything in terms of. In
the neighborhood I'm in, there's a lot of car leases, because there's a lot of new cars every 3 years around here, which is fascinating, because I drive, like, my newest car is a 2011. Yeah. My second newest car is a 2004. So I definitely do not fit in with this crowd. But I could see gas being a premium model. And I think eventually it ends up that way. Maybe not necessarily due to manufacturing costs, but due to the price of gasoline. I could see a time where, when I travel around the country, people, they're used to paying like $2.50 a gallon or $3 a gallon. Sometimes
in California.
Yeah, sometimes it'll go like $3.10 or something, and I'll be riding with a local person, and they're like, price of gas is crazy. And I'm like, I'm paying about $4.60 a gallon right now, and I'm happy. Like, it's been worse. There have been times where I have paid upwards of $7 a gallon during the gas crunches and everything that they have. So I could see a time where it's a premium, where ICE is premium based on the price of what it takes to power the vehicle, not based on manufacturing costs or anything to do with that. And I think if that's the case, you end up with things like Ferrari, Lamborghini, and them fitting into that niche. And maybe, M3s, Porsche 911s, things along those lines that are more of an enthusiast vehicle. And kind of building in with that was something we talked about, I think, last week, was weight becomes an issue. If you want a real performance car, there's party trick cars like the Plaid. Don't shoot me, but it's a party trick. If you want a performance vehicle that will do more than a quarter-mile run, you've got to get a nice vehicle at this point.
Or more than one lap at the Nürburgring, as we discussed last week.
A full 20 or 30-minute track session without a dramatic fall-off in performance during that, and then without the panic of having to, how do you recharge it? Because right now, not a lot of tracks have level 3 charging capabilities at them. The track near me, they've just installed their supercharger. They've now got a Tesla supercharger. But before that, all the Tesla owners that were coming and doing track days,
kind of SOL. Yeah.
Well, they had to drive. 20. Off-site. It was like 20-something minutes. They would leave. They would drive south on the freeway. They would go and charge up. They'd get a cup of coffee. They would get back in their car. They'd come back. They'd then plug in. They'd rent a RV spot. They'd plug in there, essentially level 2 charge, kind of to get back what they lost. Yeah. Well, they would get back what they lost on the drive back.
On the drive from the charger, yeah.
And that would get them through their session. And then as soon as the session ends, back in the car, drive down. I mean, heaven forbid something should happen to the vehicle and that you need to rotate tires or change brakes or check out suspension components that, you hit a curb or whatever it is. So I could see that. It's very much like the horse market. The horse market didn't go away when cars came here. It just went high end.
Yeah.
It just went to
effectively kind of a luxury item now.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I think back to automakers, and now there was this, they all chased the shiny thing. They all went to EV. The governments were all like, okay, well, let's get emissions down to nothing and let's mandate EVs. And now we've had the new administration come in. And like you said, I think you're right. I think this is a combination. This would have been happening anyway. You would have had GM and Ford backing away a little bit from EVs.
Well, even before Trump, there was some lobbying to kind of make the requirements a little less onerous.
Yeah,
both in the U.S. and Europe specifically.
Because it's expensive to make an EV.
Yeah, and they were
you got shareholders to please.
Yeah,
and you want to make the ICE vehicles, you want to ride that into the grave. You just don't want to be in the grave with no other products to then sell to get you out of that. So
I think the one company that I think best exemplifies this trend, and I think potentially could be the most vulnerable, I feel, is Stellantis, because they all complained under Tavares where he canceled the Hemi, and this really hard push into EVs, which their core market, like we talked about, for I'd say probably the last decade, they've really, Dodge specifically has really cultivated this bad boy image, tire smoking and Hemi and
loud engine,
and they really kind of really, I mean, this is going to sound bad, but they really conditioned their core market to really want that and crave that experience and
very much
that.
So. Yeah.
So then they do the switcheroo with the Charger EV, and everyone's like, WTF, like, what is this? This is nothing. This isn't what we asked for, basically. And then now with Filosa and Tim Kuniskis and all that, they came back and said, Tavares policies are out. We're not doing that anymore. They brought back the Hemi and the Ram 1500, which was that was a Tavares policy that was reversed, because he was really pushing, the Hurricane turbo straight 6 is like, this is going to replace the Hemi. So basically all the half tons, they completely got rid of the V8 and the half tons. So they brought that back. It sounds like they're trying to get the Hemi back in the Charger. That's still rumor. That's not factual, but it sounds like within the next few years they're going to, go, full throttle on bringing back the Hemi.
Everything old is new again.
Muscle. Yeah. So, but I feel that's a pretty short runway. I feel 3, max 5 years that they can ride that train. And after that, I do think it will be dependent on who's in the White House to an extent. If it's Vance or whoever, I think it'll largely be a continuation of the current policies in terms of, emissions, CAFE, all that. If it's a more progressive administration, I think you will see a rapid snapback to the Biden era policies, and possibly even more stringent than that, going forward, targeting like 2035, as kind of basically like what California was proposing, but nationally. And I think companies like Stellantis that really went, heavy all into ICE, they could find themselves in a potentially kind of vulnerable position. I mean, I do know they're still doing some EV R&D, more so in Europe, and they're working on like battery and motor technology and so forth. But for the U.S. market, which is their biggest market, they're like,
So that's kind of my question. Is now you've got, I mean, the rest of the world, I think they're going to dial it. Well, maybe not China, I don't know, but like Europe, they're probably going to be dialing it back a little bit. I think they are already. because it's a natural correction. It was a knee-jerk reaction to go. It was like, oh, Tesla, and
we got to do this too.
Yeah, and they jumped at the shiny thing. I keep going back to the shiny thing. They jumped at that, and they really shouldn't have jumped as high as they did. It should have been a slower ramp up. And so I think that maybe they're correcting to something that's more acceptable. I don't know Europe quite as well. It seems like America is just dialing it back. Like it's like 2018 again. It's let it rain gasoline and good times roll. Which I got to say, it was pretty good during the time of, when the Hellcats and all that stuff was coming out. Like the Mustang, like we had a golden era again of the V8, super high horsepower. Just, it was beautiful. If you're a car enthusiast, it was fantastic. But now they're kind of, they went to the EV thing, and now they seem to all be largely dialing it back. Now that's based on what they're going to be promoting and what they're going to be selling. But do you think that they're going to keep with the EV development, with the battery manufacturing plants, with all of this that's required? Because back to what I just said, China's not going to be dialing this back. No. China's going to be ramping this up. They've got pollution issues, and they can just brute force this. The country can just subsidize everything and pay for everything. And they can be in a position where when America says, okay, in say it's the next administration, they come in and they hopefully don't do what you just said of like make it back to Biden policies. Hopefully it's a ramp. Hopefully they go, okay, let's do this reasonable. We need quick digression. We need we need politicians that are going to make middle of the road decisions, and we need that for a long time.
Rational policies, not just knee jerk.
We need people that are going to work with the other side and meet in the middle, because I hate to tell people this, but we're all kind of, the majority of us are in the middle. We are all wanting the same thing by and large. We don't want extreme things, but we're seeing the extreme things. We're experiencing, so the politicians are getting in on the extreme things, and it's leading to bad stuff. So back to my question, China's going to keep developing its EVs. The American market is going to go all gasoline all the time, apparently, through EREVs and PHEVs. And because we've still got to meet emission standards, even though they're dialing it back. It's not like they're dialing it back to 1950. So it's still, you've still got this progression, and they're always going to, manufacturers are always going to be looking for efficiencies, because efficiency in manufacturing is going to make efficiencies in production and yada, yada, yada. But when the next administration comes in, whether it's the next one or the one after, whatever it is, eventually we're going to end up with Democrats back in power.
Yes.
That will happen eventually.
Sooner or later,
Do you think all these manufacturers, the American manufacturers at the very least, are continuing the development to a point that makes a difference when all of this gets reversed? Or is this just, are we now being isolationists with our manufacturing and everything, and American first, except for Argentinian beef, America first, to the point that it's to our detriment? It's going to create another little golden era now, but it will be to our global detriment in a decade.
Depends on the company. So I think a few things are happening kind of behind the scenes. China is licking their chops to get into the U.S. market. They're just waiting. They're kind of the barbarian. I mean, probably a bad analogy, but
don't do it.
They're just like waiting to come in with their models, because China has an overcapacity problem. They're basically building more EVs than they can sell, more than their domestic market can absorb, and they're facing trade barriers around the world, in Europe and so forth. They're starting to set up manufacturing in Europe and to kind of circumvent these trade barriers. I'm sure they would love to, have a manufacturing presence in the U.S. They probably will eventually, but so there's that. So they're like poised and prepped to just like basically flood the market effectively. I think almost all the manufacturers in the world are aware of this and they're kind of prepping for it, but it's like, you know, kind of like let the good times roll as long as they can, for now. But yeah, I like I said, I'm just going to go back. The company I'm most concerned about strategically is Stellantis, because I think short term, and by short term I mean next 3 to 5 years, they could massively increase their sales and profits with, Hemi powered everything, right? But it's gonna get to a point where they could be in a very vulnerable position, from a regulatory standpoint, even a shift in consumer preferences, whereas where their models just aren't considered as desirable anymore. Now, for a small niche of enthusiasts, they all, you're always going to have fans of the Hellcat and the Hemis and all that, but I think that's becoming a smaller and smaller market, to the point where even from a volume standpoint, it's kind of like, if they get down to selling like 20 or 30,000 of them a year, as opposed to 100, 200,000 of them a year. And, everyone else is buying either the V6 model or the EV. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy right now because, the Charger EV is just sitting on lots collecting dust in a lot of cases, and dealers are, $20,000 discount on them because they're just not moving. But, I don't know. I don't know when that shift's going to happen, but I think GM, I'll give it to Mary Barra. I think she's being very shrewd and strategic in the way she's approaching things. I mean, she has been kind of brutal and kind of, enforcing discipline, kind of financial and operational discipline at the company. First is, they basically kind of cut their losses with Cruise which was their like autonomous division. Mm-hmm. And they basically absorbed that, into the company. And I just saw, this was just this week, the news that they're targeting 2028 for an eyes off autonomous system. So basically like Super Cruise Plus, I guess, effectively. Because right now they have a hands off system, but it still requires you to look at the road. But say they're targeting, 2028 where, be on your phone, watch a movie, whatever, I guess.
Getting motion sickness, feeling ill for the next 4 hours, regretting life's decisions after that. That's my life. So they did that. Bright Drop, that another recent news. They're just like, sayonara. So they have made some, tough and quick decisions on divisions that they see as kind of money losers. But yet at the same time, they brought back the Bolt. They supposedly have kind of similar to Ford, and some people might say this kind of us too, that they're developing like a family of affordable EVs. So like the Bolt is basically kind of a placeholder for this next generation of models there'll be like 3 or 4, kind of similar to what Ford's doing. I don't know what the form factor is going to be. I mean, Ford, they're going to lead with a pickup, and then it's going to be like a crossover in a van and all that. I don't know what GM's plan is, but at the same time, they just invested almost $1 billion in the plant that's going to build the next generation small block V8. So they're still trying to kind of thread that needle, so to speak. BMW. I mean, they've actually had a fair amount of success with their EVs, but they've been pretty vocal about pushing back on like, the quote EV mandate. And, I don't know. Do you think EVs... So I keep thinking of left to their own accord. Take politics out of this. Take mandates out of this. Take emissions out of this. Or freeze emissions, I guess, as to where we are. Do you think the natural progression is to EVs? Do you think... Because to me, the only way that the manufacturers would progress to EVs is if they can produce an EV cheaper than they can produce an ICE vehicle. And every time I work on one of my cars, I look at the complexity of it and go, how the hell does all this work? Like, there's no way that this is cost effective to do this. So
Well,
Do
it's
you
again
think?
because it's like a century old paradigm.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they're used to doing it that way. So, oh, well, it's just the
And
way we do it.
manufacturing's already set up. Everything's already
Yeah.
paid for itself. You can produce these things like there's already, you know, I forget. Is it Brazil? Is something where all the starters come from? Like from cars,
Yeah.
like there's a country in South America that seems to be like every time I buy a starter, that's where it comes from. And so this is already global supply chain is already set up for all of this, and that's driven down the cost. Do you think that they see a time where an EV is cheaper, that they would continue down that road as a manufacturer, even though they know they're going to lose money now, that they know in 8 years' time, the break-even point, the charts, the lines on the bar graph will cross, and EVs will be less expensive, and then they can produce those for less money than ICE, and so of course that's going to be the model that they then produce and promote. Do you think that would naturally, is that, how far down the road is that? Is that possible? And are we looking 5 years, 10 years, 20?
That's kind of the
got your
great
magic 8
unknown.
ball.
Well, no, I just remember, back in like, I think it was 08, 09 when gas prices like really spiked up, and all of a sudden Prius sales were like going off the charts.
Oh yeah.
And people that,
the smart cars also were selling for like crazy amounts of money. People were paying like 40 and 50 grand for a smart car.
So it's there's so many moving parts to this and so many variables. It's hard to like pinpoint. So I definitely think fuel prices is a big motivator for consumer behavior. Without question, government regulation has pushed a lot of this. I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid that. Would it have happened? I think it probably would have happened, but the cause would have been like if there was another big, gas price spike, or like an oil embargo, or something like that would have, because this is R&D into EVs goes back to the 70s. And there were and EVs themselves go back almost to the dawn of the car itself. But
there's like pictures of, was it Mercedes or Ford, whatever, like they had fleets of EVs. Like originally it was EVs, steam, and was it gasoline or diesel? I don't remember. There was like the three that were competing, and EVs quickly lost out due to no charging infrastructure. and
kind of the limitations of
but then it turned into like steam versus diesel or gasoline. That was then that. But yeah, this goes back to like the early 1900s.
Yeah, so this isn't a new thing, but ultimately, I mean, to really go out into like the far future, looking deep into my crystal ball, oil is still a finite resource. Now, the estimates as to how much we still have, they vary all the time. Some people say, I remember in the 70s and 80s, they said 30 years we're going to be completely out of oil.
Yeah,
blah, blah,
we were
blah.
going to be out by the late 70s, I think.
But then, they discovered fracking. They made new discoveries. Now they're like, oh, well, we got more than a century. But it's effectively a finite resource. It's a very volatile resource, and that, geopolitical factors, and you're even seeing this outside of automobiles, like, for instance, with Europe and its dependence on Russian natural gas. That's causing some friction over there. So, the thing with EVs is like, you can make electricity in a, nuclear, coal, natural gas, renewables, whatever. So you're not as, if you have the resources to produce your own energy, you're kind of cutting out that strategic vulnerability that you would otherwise have, independence from another nation. So I do think EVs are inevitable. Now, how quickly that tipping point's going to come, I still don't think we've had what I call the iPhone moment. And a lot of people thought that was like the Model 3 was the iPhone moment with EVs. I still don't think it's happened yet. Where, and I guess my definition of an iPhone moment is when a new product or a new paradigm is so demonstrably superior to what came before. It's just self-evident. Like you don't even really have to hard sell it that much. People just naturally kind of gravitate toward it, and they say, I want this. This does things way better than what came before it. So I'm going to get this. I think
we're somewhat getting there, and it's going to inch up on us. That iPhone moment is going to be, it's not going to be a moment. It's going to be, you'll look back and go, okay, that was the moment. And maybe there's going to be multiple moments. I don't know. But it goes back to what we've been talking about last few episodes of like the perfect price and features for an EV. And we're going to hit that, and it's going to be on a vehicle that, like, the Model Y at $25,000 might be the iPhone moment. That there is, at that point, zero reason to buy anything else at that point. Yeah. Like, that is the obvious thing. And maybe it's not just the Model Y. Maybe it's the Model Y and the Mach-E and whatever, you know, the all those cars just kind of hit that price parity. Yeah. And go, and now there is zero reason.
In addition to charging infrastructure and some other factors that kind of converge.
Yep.
And then it'll become kind of obvious, and like people say, yeah, why wouldn't I? Yeah.
So I'd said freeze, you know, take politics out of this and freeze emissions like where they are today. But then you brought up something that's kind of interesting, because you can't really take politics out of almost anything. But you almost made a case for national security, or you did make a case for national security. And it makes me wonder why. I guess it's because the amount of money that the oil lobbies pump into Washington. Yeah. Why you've got the Democrats on one side saying, well, we need EVs because we need to save the birds and the trees. And then you've got, why do we not have the Republicans saying,
conservative case saying
national security, we need to remove what we're bringing in, bring manufacturing and everything into America, and that involves not bringing fossil fuels into America and relying on our own infrastructure that we have, which we can build up with hydrogen.
Well, I mean,
that's ultimately where I was going with this entire
I think the reason
episode.
that conversation is not happening is just populist politics. It's not. It's kind of, I feel, too nerdy and abstract for a lot of people to really get their heads around. So, but it is a real thing. For decades, the Pentagon has researched. So I'm not a military expert, but I've read enough. So dependence on fossil fuel is a strategic vulnerability on the battlefield. Basically, the logistics of getting fuel to the why am I drawing a blank? The battlefront, I guess, for lack of a better term. You're exposing yourself to enemy interception of a tanker or whatever to provide that fuel. And if somehow that's compromised or cut off, you're a sitting duck, right? So they've worked on renewables, hydrogen in some cases, ways to kind of be self-sustaining in the battlefield as much as possible, reducing the reliance on the need for this constant stream of fossil fuels. So absolutely, there's a very strong case to be made for national defense, and even holistic national defense, national security, because even though I think broadly the U.S. is still the number one producer of oil, we're still a net importer. So, even so, basically, if we tried to be 100% self-sufficient, we could not do that with our current usage effectively. So even if we said we don't want to import any more oil, and that's not going to happen, the global oil market is just this crazy, multi-tentacled beast. But anyway, even if we could, we couldn't do it right now. we burn too much oil right now to be self-sufficient. So there is a case for that too. If we shifted, let's say 25-30% of the national car fleet to EVs, maybe we could save the rest of it for trucking, for transport, other uses. But absolutely. But again, I think the predominant conservative narrative, just that's not sexy. That doesn't really resonate with voters. They know, what kind of liberal propaganda is this?
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's to a point with Stellantis, it's the same problem. They've conditioned people to expect a thing, and they've not conditioned
and then
people.
When you suddenly take away the toy, they're like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah. And you've sold them on America Freedom, big V8s, burning gasoline, and then you suddenly go to, oh, well, national security, we need to be all EV. That's a really hard sell. That's a flop that you can't flip the flop on that. At least not overnight.
I think what would happen if not that I wish for this, but if there was another 9/11 type moment, I guess that really, if there's any one positive thing that came out of 9/11, I feel at least for a period, there was kind of this common identity and a rallying around and kind of a shared resolve among Americans for the most part. Now, there were still disagreements and conspiracy theories and whatnot, but at least for a moment, it kind of was more of kind of shared common identity and purpose. I think if we, again, I don't wish this, if we were to be attacked either directly or indirectly by a foreign adversary, and somehow, oil prices spiked and that kind of worked into that, I think you could see kind of a common cause rallying around like, hey, we really quickly need to shift to renewables or reduce our dependence on oil. And you would see broad popular support for that. But I'd say apart from kind of a cataclysmic event, I don't think it's going to be a very slow, gradual kind of, shift.
No, I think the attack, the quote unquote attack could just be the increase in oil prices. That could be enough to, like, if everybody had to suddenly pay $8 a gallon, $10, $12 a gallon. I can tell you, I haven't been road racing for a few years. When I stopped, price of gas I was paying $9, maybe $10 a gallon.
For race gas. Yeah.
And now I've been to the track, and it seems like it's closer to $12. And I've seen some cases where it's upwards of 14 at some tracks per gallon. And I've got a car that gets 6 miles per gallon on the track. So I'm swapping over to 91 octane from 100 because it's just too much. Yeah. It's just, the price is just too much. I look at I know how much power I can make. I know on one, I know how much power I make on the other. I know how much horsepower I'm losing, but I go, you know what? For the price, I am swapping.
Yeah.
That this is no longer justifiable. And I could see that there is suddenly the price of gas for street vehicles goes to $9, $10 a gallon in Nebraska. And they go, wow, I love my Hellcat. But
yeah,
this other vehicle, the Charger Daytona EV, whatever it's called, is sitting on the lot, and it goes just as fast. And I'm charging at a fraction of the price. I'm paying the price that I used to pay for gas, and I'm now paying for electricity. I'm going to go to that. But I think it's going to be a horrible amount of pain to get people to naturally switch to that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what it would take on a large scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I think incrementally, like I said, butts and seats, taking your neighbor for a drive, that's going to keep increasing, and the shift will happen. But it would take, a major event like an extreme fuel price spike, a national security event, something along those lines, for a rapid switch, I think, honestly.
How do you want to wrap this episode? I've been pondering that while I've been speaking. I don't even remember how we started, let alone where we've gone to.
We just kind of meandered all over the place.
This episode was very much the concept. I guess maybe this is how we'll end this. This episode was very much the concept of what I originally envisioned this podcast to be. Because Ed and I used to work near each other when we actually went to offices.
Imagine that. Yeah.
So we would go out once a week, I think it was, and we'd have lunch. And then we just talk cars. And it was, the conversation would just wander for an hour. And you didn't really start in any one particular, maybe you started with one topic. And it just kind of went for an hour. And then at the end of the hour, you go, great, see ya. And then you go back to work. The next week, we go somewhere else. And in one of those, we ended up with the What Car. Was kind of what came out of.
Why don't we do something with this?
Why don't we do something? And that was that week's conversation. And so a couple months went by. We actually put it to fruition. But this is very much that type of conversation that I originally envisioned of this was literally us just sitting down saying, what about this that we've been dancing around? Let's talk about this for an hour.
Yeah.
And so I guess
we go.
This is ultimately the way that I envision this podcast. So make a comment in YouTube and let me know if this is this a better format of just Ed and I talking, or maybe we bring other people in some weeks, whatever, just talking. Now we're always going to talk about news because that's, what we would talk about as well. Oh, did you see this new car or whatever? But this is kind of a meandering conversation that starts with our automakers backing away, and shouldn't be, from EVs, to is this actually an issue of national security and should have nothing to do with emissions requirements or the left or the right, that there is a benefit to having a nation that is producing its own stuff and is sustainable. Not that I want to be, an empire that doesn't communicate with other, I don't want to, let's not go to North Korea here.
We're part of the global community, whether we like it or not.
Yes. So I still want that. But is there actually a national security argument to be made here? Anyway, thewhatcar.com/store. Buy yourself a t-shirt. It loses us money. It's great economics for us. The show notes, I don't know. There'll be some links. Maybe, I don't know. If there are show notes, I'll put the links into the podcast, and also the youtube.com/@thewhatcar. You'll find that there. We're on social media.
Join us next time for more meandering conversations.
Yeah, maybe more meandering conversation. Who knows? We got a couple weeks where we've got to do meandering conversations as we come up to the holidays. Because I don't know about you, but we put this episode out on a Thursday, and I don't want to work on the Wednesday or Thursday of holidays. So there you go.
There you go.
I don't even remember what I was talking about because I'm just going to stop. We've been talking for long enough. When we started this episode, I thought that's a 20-minute conversation.
At the What Car.
Wait, what was that?
What? YouTube.com/@the-What Car.
Yes, go there. All right. Next week, same stuff.
Different day. Maybe not. Maybe not. Don't know.